Good afternoon. This is Kim Taylor. This is the September 19th meeting of the Fairfield Harbor Management Commission. In person here at Town Hall are Jack Hirschler, Doug Metchik. On the phone is with me and Don Hyman, so we have a quorum. Also in attendance are the Harbor Master, Brian LeClaire, Assistant Harbor Master, John Dean, Betty Gabriel, Recording Secretary, and Jeff Stedman, our consultant. Let's get this meeting to order and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. The first order of business is to approve the minutes from our August 15th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve them as distributed? Jack moves.
Second.
Doug seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It passed unanimously. The July minutes also need to be approved. Can I have a motion? Doug moves. Jack seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's taken care of. Thank you very much, everybody. The chairman's report on August 18th, we were copied on a letter from DEEP to Attorney Chris Russo, sending Attorney Russo the updated Condition 5 of the permit for 1143 Sasko Hill Road, which, if you recall, modified the language of the original permit to incorporate our parentheses to that condition, which said such as sunfish, Hobie cats, and basically smaller boats. On September 6th, Jeff Warren, Jeff Stedman, and I met via WebEx with the Army Corps of Engineers working on the dredging. Coral Salgado, the project manager, Julie Byers, the attorney with the real estate division, and Nicole Dapik, who was also in the real estate division. Our meeting topic was to discuss the mapping of the area where the Corps intends, or would like to anyway, park their equipment while the dredging is underway. And Jeff and I, Jeff Warren, if he makes it to the meeting, can fill you in when we get to sand management item on the agenda. And on September 12th, Betsy Brown, the town clerk, emailed me that the DEEP permit, a DEEP permit had been filed with the land records in Town Hall for 701 Harbor Road, which is Perry Green, and that tells us that the permit for the bulkhead work there at Perry Green had been approved by DEEP, and the ball is now in the town's court to proceed with that work. Any questions? Okay, hearing no questions. Harbor Master.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yep.
Hi, this is Dave Henry. I'm sorry I signed on 2 minutes late. Just wanted to say it for the record.
Great, Dave. Glad you're with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Harbor
Chairwoman.
Master? Yep.
I'll report since our last meeting, which was August 15th, or my last report of August 15th. A lot has been going on. We've been busy this last month or so. In addition to the usual patrols around the harbor, keeping an eye on things, checking mooring lines before storms, checking the moorings themselves, I've spoken to kayakers, reminding them, to keep the channel clear, safety reminders as necessary, weather reminders. I've had to remind several visitors to the harbor about our speed enforcement, as well as where to fish and where not to fish, so not to block moorings or get tangled up on the mooring lines. Had to remind visitors of our bow to stern moorings so they don't cut across them when they get somewhere they shouldn't. We did have a few other incidents. We had, in August, a small powerboat stranded itself adjacent to the country club on the east side of the channel, right by the beginning of the mooring field near Souffle. It was a bunch of kids who just went out there and beached their boat to go over to the country club for a while and forgot the tides go in and out. and it was high and dry. So we helped them figure out how to get the boat back in the water. So it was a learning experience for them, and everything was fine. We had a powerboat sinking, did not sink all the way, at Perry Green in August. The yacht club caught it first thing in the morning. I went out there, met with them. We took the boat out. We boarded it to try to, it was pumped out to try to figure why it was taking on water. We located the owner of the boat, and it was removed before it went down. So it was it looks like a bilge pump issue, but for some reason water was coming on it. We had some swimmers off of a mooring, a boat that was moored in the harbor. They decided to go swimming off at the kids, so we've talked to them, reminded them they can't do that. There was an issue with Green Day Mark number 7. I think what happened is one of the nests fell off, and it was a little bit different at the top with one of the solar panels. We told the Coast Guard. They sent someone out there to take a look at it. In September so far, we had debris floating in the channel next to the lower wharf. A large piece of wood, half the size of this table, floated in. We also had some additional debris floating out by the 2 speed buoys we picked up. I got a call late one evening from a resident on Fairfield Beach Road. They were concerned that there was a barge in distress of some type because it had been sitting off their house all evening. So I went out there and took a look at it. It anchored for the night off of Fairfield Beach on its journey. It was fully illuminated. It appeared to be just fine. And so the husband wasn't worried, but his wife was very worried it would drift ashore. So I assured them that with the lights on, they would call for help if they needed it. And it was a calm night. They weren't going anywhere. So that was resolved without having to go out there or send the police out. Over Labor Day weekend, Green 13 broke loose, tried to escape the harbor. It made it as far as the country club. So we coordinated with the Fairfield police, who sent one of the bigger boats out to grab it. They brought it back up to Yacht Yard. I called the Coast Guard. They sent a crew out a few days later and put it back in the water, had a notice to mariners in the meantime. And I emailed folks in the channel in the harbor telling them to be careful with it missing. Don't use the USGS buoys as a western point because we know it gets shallow there. And if you have a full boat, think that's the end of the channel. You're going to be sitting there for a while at low tide watching USGS buoy. There was an incident reported involving a community sailing boat striking a boat on a mooring. This is relatively new. I reached out to get the name of the witness, and I spoke to the boat owner, who's going to reach out to community sailing, see whether we have to do further investigation or they will deal with this directly. It was just a scrape on the hull of his boat by a community sailing vessel. In Yacht Yard, one of my evening patrols found a pontoon punctured on a rigid bottom inflatable, not a rigid bottom, a soft bottom inflatable that was sinking. Couldn't get it out of the water all the way with a deflated pontoon. It went stern down, bow up, so we secured it, called the owner to have it removed before it totally sank. And we've had several inquiries. It's boat show season, so 2 different mooring holders have reached out. They want to get larger boats, so I've coordinated with the yacht club whether we can accommodate them and how big they can go and still fit in their assigned spots. And as you know, the moorings coming along the walls are coming out this year, so there's a chance to move a few if necessary or strengthen a few. We talked about making a few a little bit bigger over the season as the boats grow over time and make them not go anywhere. And Sunday, we had a boat suddenly start taking on water in the Yacht Club North Mooring area. So we went out there. We're joined by the Yacht Club. They did a great job, the young men who were working, getting a pump out there quickly on a battery, tying up one of the tenders to it. And with me pushing and them pulling, we got it over to the dock, put the big hose in it from the pump out, and that kept the level. There was quite a bit of water in the boat. And we then were able to go through the boat and find where the water was coming in from. It was a broken sink pump with an open through hull that had the water coming in. Luckily, the owner happened to be going by and noticed something different about his boat, and then it was because it was quickly taking out water. So it worked out quite well, and the kids, like I said, at the club, the young men there did a great job helping me and taking the lead, getting the thing over and getting it the problem solved. So other than that, it's been quiet.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for the Harbor Master? Okay, no questions, let's move on to, Lower Wharf repairs. Mr. Santa,
Yes.
do you have an
Yeah,
update from the, regulators?
I have an update from my research,
Okay,
but I haven't contacted the regulators per se. So, to go back in history, we have a permit on hand to reconstruct the Lower Wharf Pier as it currently was prior to the, Christmas storm. There was some discussion as to the reconstruction in a T-head or L-head configuration. The permit on hand is for an L-head. Talked to the state about what it takes to modify that. They said, hey, you can go through a general permit to reconstruct the northern section. My concern is I don't think the state is correct. They're saying there's a general permit you can apply for. It's as of right to reconstruct a previously permitted structure, but there's some limitations in there. Specifically, it limits it to something that was in a serviceable state or suffered a casualty loss within a calendar year. So that section doesn't really comply with either of those things. My fear is it's not even an application, it's a registration, so you don't even get anything back. So we can send this paperwork in as requested by the state, but it technically wouldn't comply. So I'd be concerned that if and when it comes time to construct that T-head 1, 2, 5 years in the future, someone in the state may say, hey, you don't have, all the boxes aren't checked. So I don't think I'd recommend just filing that registration. I think I would say, I'd redo the certificate of permission to pick that piece of it up if it was important to the commission to have that picked up, because then it would be defensively permanent.
I personally don't think we can afford to have any questions about what's permitted and what's not permitted when the time comes to start doing, when we get the money, or when we apply to somebody to get the money to do the work. I think we have to be rock solid. I don't know what other commissioners feel, but.
Well, is it an either or can we register and then also apply?
I think you'd want to apply. The registration is kind of funny. These general permits, they're tough because they narrow the box so much that so many things don't fit in them. So of all the applications we do, which are a lot, there's very few general permits we do, because every time we go to the state, like, Ed doesn't comply because of this, doesn't comply because of that. A perfect example, we were going to, for the Bridgeport Ferry, the lifting mechanism for the ramp, one of the piles was bending and falling over. And we said, this is a problem. This is a heavy ramp, cars are coming over it, this ferry is infrastructure, it's transportation. We talked to the state, said, hey, we gotta get on this pretty rapidly. We think this would be a general permit, because it's a previously permitted thing. They said, well, how would you affect the repair? So, well, barge would come in and we put in 2 temporary piles to support it, we put the new thing, temporary piles would come out, the whole thing would be over in about 10 days. They said, well, the general permit doesn't authorize temporary structures. I said, anytime you build something, you have temporary something, you have false work frames. They said, no, we have to authorize that specifically. So they take such a hard line on these things that nothing fits within their boxes. So I think they're trying to throw the commission a bone here to say, yeah, just do this. But I think if they look at it with more scrutiny, it might not pass that scrutiny. So my suggestion would be, if the commission does want to have that northern leg authorized, to apply for a COP to authorize that movement.
And what would that cost?
About $2,500.
$2,500?
Yeah. Read all the paperwork and all the forms and drawings and all that stuff.
Jeff?
Would we just have one COP though for the whole thing? You would amend the existing one, or would we have 2 separate?
I think you have 2 separate COPs. I don't think they handle it like a full permit. Because I was asking, full permits sometimes they'll amend, like Sasko, where they amended the condition after the issuance of the permit. They won't do that for a COP.
We'd have two COPs.
So is there any downside to having two COPs?
Dates
I
are
don't think
different.
so. The dates are different.
What did you say?
Dates are different. I think
The
we
date, oh, right, the dates are different,
you
but
have
aside from
different
that,
expiration.
it would be like 6 months different. Well, by the time we get done, right?
And how-
March, April, go ahead.
How long do we have to do the work before the COP expires?
5 years. It used to be 5 for a permit and 3 for a COP, and they synchronized it, so it was 5.
So we have 5 and an opportunity to extend it for 1 year, or?
They usually allow for 2 one-year extensions. Nothing is as of right. It's their call to do. They won't do a single 2-year extension,
Yeah.
but they will often grant 1-year extensions 2 times.
So theoretically, that gives us 7 years,
Yeah,
more or less.
yeah.
And the fact that the decking has been removed from the piers, so the pilings are just standing on their own, that doesn't affect what we're...
That section is authorized. The section we're talking about is the one to the north that never had decking on it in the history of my awareness.
It had some cross pieces
Yeah.
across the top,
Yeah.
but so it's just pilings now.
I
That should-
don't think that would change the serviceability of it.
I think,
So
thank
commission,
you for doing all the research on this.
No,
yeah, thank you.
Of course.
So commissioners, what should we do?
Well, I mean, when you first brought it up, I actually wasn't clear on the distinction, that it was the section to the north.
Yeah.
And not the whole thing. Particularly with that distinction, I think that we should do the thing that gives us the strongest case with little downside, so I would certainly be in favor of applying for a permit and not pursuing the general registration.
Yeah.
For that recommendation, I guess.
Jack?
Agree.
Don, you have any thoughts? Dave?
Agree.
Don, you agree?
I agree with the discussion so far that we should apply for that other permit.
Okay, can I, since we're gonna spend some money, can I have a motion?
Sure, I'll make the motion that we apply for a permit.
It's a certificate of permission.
For a COP.
Yeah, not a full
Yeah,
permit, it's a certificate.
We apply for a COP for that northern section.
For the COP for the northern section, with the expectation that it'll be about $2,500?
Yeah, what's that? Madam Chair, one thing I say is,
Yep.
you're not compelled to do anything. You don't have,
Right.
not do that at all and apply for it at another time. If there's another thought that you want to do something different.
Right, but I think the concern is that we've got a plan for the whole area.
Okay.
And we're gonna go to people with saying, this is what the whole area is gonna look like. And if we can in fact work the whole area, I think that's a stronger request for money than if we just say, well, it's only this piece, not that
This is
piece.
our best chance to bring the two together.
Yeah,
It gives us the flexibility to do the whole thing. We don't have to, depending on the money, but we'd have the ability to do the whole project.
Okay. I just want to bring that up.
yeah, no, thank you, Devin, yes, but I think that's where we're coming from on this.
So you need a second also.
Jack seconds? Okay, so the motion is to ask Race to apply for a COP for the northern pier at the lower wharf with the expectation that it'll be about $2,500. Doug has moved, Jack is second. Do we have any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so that's taken care of. Great. Thanks, Devin.
Oh, thank you. I'll send a agreement to your attention. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Before we depart from that,
Yep.
since our last meeting, there was a little bit of an exchange Jeff and I had, I think you might have been copied on that, about the photographic evidence of this area's history. And it looks like the pier that we're talking about is a right around end of World War II construction. And there was clearly, looks like in the 30s and perhaps before that, a period where there was no pier, just the wall. And we just don't know how historic the pier piece of this was versus boats just tied up against that wall, because we don't have photographs, obviously, that go way, way back. So I think it's important for us to understand that it's not really, in my head, it's not really historic. It's in the
later half of the 20th century it was historic, but certainly not, there's no evidence that it was used in the 19th century or before.
The onion boats didn't tie up there.
Yeah, or if they tied up to a stone wall. You know,
Right.
It appears. I mean, there's pictures that are showing that. So I think it's okay for us to be doing this, but be not actually accurate to describe the pier itself as historic, unless we find some more evidence of that. So I thought it was interesting to see. I sort of imagined that the whole thing was historic and went in both directions, north and south, and it may not be the case.
Some of those photographs are difficult to interpret too, with the what do you call it? There's like a glare on some.
Right. Some are aerial pictures from the 1930s, the first ones that we saw, yeah.
And then looking at the old Corps of Engineers, Army surveys of the harbor.
Yeah. Interesting, though.
It's very interesting.
Very interesting. Although there were some people, I mean, I guess we're showing our age, there are some people who would find mid-20th century historic.
He remembers.
What?
Pat, he remembers.
Now, Pat, what do you remember? Pat Carroll?
Say
Are you
again?
there?
Yes,
Yeah,
I am.
what do you remember about the piers at the lower wharf?
What do I remember about the piers?
Jack was trying to date them.
Yes, we saw photographs, Pat, from the...
Oh, God almighty. They go long before our time. Really, really, I can remember back in high school. So that, and I graduated in 1940. So it goes. I can remember those piers. I can remember big boats tying up. Big boats from the Pequot Yacht Club, yachts that come in. It was a very active location as far as I can recall.
Interesting. Thank you. Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah.
We just have to hunt down some more pictures.
Right.
Okay, great. Thank you for that motion, everybody. Lower Wharf ship grant refund. Are we any closer to giving?
I almost. That's my fault that it's not completed yet.
Okay, it's still in the works.
I did talk with the director, Mr. Hammond, who's the only person left at the Port Authority that has knowledge about this, and told him we would get that to him. But,
great. Okay, good.
Sorry, I haven't finished that.
So the port.
Betty did all the work, and I didn't assemble it.
No, that's fine. As long as the Port Authority knows that it's coming, and we still have a handle on it.
Yeah.
That's really all I have it on the agenda for.
Might say also, for the discussion about the Lower Wharf, George Russell, representing the Sasquatch Association, was supposed to attend the meeting today, and then he just let us know before the meeting he had a conflict and asked that we let him know what we're doing. We have to fill out the certificate of appropriateness for the Historic District Commission concerning the removal of the decking. And the form is quite easy, but on the back of it there are some attachments that are required, including photographs. So we put together a compilation of photos showing the damage right after the storm of December 22nd and 23rd. And then last Friday I took some photos showing what the site looks like now. So we get that to the Historic District Commission next week, or at the end of this week.
That's great. Okay.
I have photos too, if you need them, of when they took it down and they were stockpiling the pieces they were pulling out the deck. I have pictures if you need them.
Why don't you send those? I'll add them.
Show you the rot and the problem with them.
Quite a few that we put together.
We need them. I'll send them.
Yeah.
I don't think they're in any rush for it, but I think we should get it to them.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so that's going to go to the HDC.
And then we'll tell Sasquatch, or through George, what the commission decided to do tonight.
Okay,
so that
good.
He asked that we let him know what we decided today.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Anything else about Lower Wharf repairs?
Excuse me, Madam Chairwoman, this is Bill Ferragini.
Hi, Bill.
How are you? I'm sorry, I'm on a train with a lousy connection, so I keep breaking up. But just had a question about that no swimming sign. It's only about 3 feet high, and I think it was recently posted. Is there any reason why it's such a small sign?
Did you say, you're breaking up a bit. Is there any?
About the no swimming.
The no swimming, is there any reason why it's such a small sign? Is that your question, Bill?
Yes.
think that might be the next.
Well, I think that if you can hang on and hear Don Hyman's report, which is coming up next, that'll take care of your question. That's a good question. Okay, Don?
Yes, thank you. Okay, on the subject of signage and risk at Lower Wharf, including the risks of swimming, certainly, there has been mostly kind of no traction yet or change since the last meeting, and the minutes of the meeting that describe what we're doing in that area on page 2 for August 15 pretty much sum up where we are today, and I'll explain why there has been no momentum, although that's not completely correct. There has been some intellectual advancement as opposed to practical or signage advancement. And let me say at the outset, the risk of swimming is well noted that and understood. The sign was put up hurriedly by Public Works as soon as they could, really, and after the pier was
at a meeting on.
And that is a temporary measure. There will be more signage on that matter once we're complete with our effort.
Up?
Okay. So suffice it to say, there was a meeting of
how's everything?
Our subcommittee and people.
I asked how things were. He said fine.
Hey, Pat?
Hey, Pat, we can hear you.
All right.
Sorry, Don.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let me continue.
I'm sorry, Don. Go ahead. Yes, please.
There was a meeting on August 29 that involved all the town people that are involved with this: Public Works, Parks, Risk Management, the ourselves, Harbor Management Commission, and we did discuss language for the sign. We discussed the appearance of the sign. We discussed approval for signage that has to be obtained by the Historic District Commission. And we discussed kind of legal review for all that. And some very clear deliverables were put together at that meeting for those attending, including ourselves. And I'm sorry to say that we weren't able to put any traction under any of those next steps because George went to Europe on holiday. I unfortunately had some medical issues come up and had to go into the hospital. And I'm out now, but I'm not quite myself. And Eric Sunderman, who's the third person in our committee, has been basically unavailable for most things. So we didn't get any further on actually executing any of the things that we thought we were going to do, but we know what has to be done. George and I plan to put together a unified document that will be the language for the sign. We have a model for how the sign would look. It would resemble the sign that's now down by Southport Beach. We know the kind of internal route of regulatory approval within the town for the language of the sign. And it starts with our commission approving it and blessing it. And what I'd like to propose is that give us a week or so for George and I to put together a document that has the language for the sign, an image of the appearance of how it would look, the next steps for how it needs to proceed through a kind of review chain, and get your comment and blessing on that. What I don't know, though, Kim, is that if that needs to happen in an actual meeting in October, or if it can be done by email prior to the October meeting.
Don, I think that that this is a matter that needs to be completely transparent and open to the public, and I think that to do it by email would not accomplish that. So I think that I think you guys have done a terrific job. You've moved us along farther than I imagined was possible, frankly. And I think if we plan to do it in October, with it on the agenda and with the opportunity for any members of the public who wish to comment, I think that we have done our job. You know, I thank you guys for your work. I'm glad you're on the mend, and you know, it will be on the agenda for our October meeting.
If it's distributed in advance, we'll have lots of time to look at it.
Right,
and be ready,
right. And we can,
the public can see it that way.
we can embed it in the agenda like we do so many things, so that when the agenda gets filed with the town clerk, that folks who are looking at the agenda can see what you've proposed, and that the commissioners will have time to take a look at it and think about it before the meeting itself. So I hope that will accomplish what you'd like to accomplish.
That would be fine with me, and I'm, you know, barring some god-awful additional hospital event, I think we can deliver on all of that, have a document to the commission that's clear, transparent, and you know, helpful to the cause, and you can comment at the October meeting, and then we'll share that with the town employee project team that we're working with. There was some other movement, all this kind of, and I apologize, but the meeting that I'm describing took place with town employees. I only could attend 5 minutes of it or so, and then I got a cell phone call and needed to run to the doctor. But George's impression, George Harris's impression was important regarding the designation of the land. As you may recall, we were discussing, is it open space? Is it park? Is it harbor open space? You know, how do we designate it? And I wasn't there for the discussion, but it seems to be from George's emails that the town was prepared to consider it a green. And that's a good thing, because that's this kind of middle zone that allows us to continue allowing dogs to visit with their owners per the existing town regulations about dogs. But if it was a park, that would not be possible. But if it's a green, it is possible. And I think we all recognize that in any event, enforcement of any of those kinds of dog-related regulations is another matter. But anyway, we're aware of all those things, and town employees seem to be aware of the need to be thoughtful about making any changes in regards to dog owners lawfully walking their dogs there. I think that's about it for me. George and I are going to talk when he's back from Europe, and I think we can move forward pretty quickly and get back on track. Sorry for the 4-week delay.
Don, you've done a terrific job. No, I'm sorry that you had medical issues. No apologies necessary. This is really terrific, and very impressive. Any questions from the commissioners for Don? No questions. Don, thank you. Thank you. Hope to see you in person in October.
I hope so.
Great. Yeah, feel better soon.
Thank you. Sand management, Mr. Stedman.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. I guess we're limited time, but Kim mentioned that we spoke with representatives of the Corps of Engineers about the project. And the Corps is almost complete. Have almost completed the environmental assessment, which is different than an environmental impact statement. It's just the same idea, but this is work that's been done before. So they're doing an environmental impact evaluation, and then they will be prepared to submit the application to DEEP for approval of the project. And they are pursuing the plan that the dredge material would be deposited offshore. dispersed offshore, rather than put on the town beach, as Steve had originally suggested or requested. And as we talked, the town survey department, again, it's very helpful that the town has been on this. They did a topographic survey of Sasko Beach and determined that it doesn't need any more sand. The elevation of the sand is actually higher than the design beach permit. I guess, Devin, you worked on that some time ago. So we can demonstrate there's no need for sand on that. So the things that need to be addressed now have to do with property and real estate. So one topic is that the Corps needs to have access to the dredging site or the excavation site for equipment. And the way that the project is planned, there will be the hopper dredge, but material will be put into that dredge by an excavator, just as the town worked twice in the past to do this. The town put excavated sand with a long-armed excavator, made it into a stockpile. A loader put it into trucks and took it along the beach to other town beaches. In this instance, we wouldn't be transporting the sand elsewhere. We'd be putting it into the hopper dredge. And by working that way, it also helps to essentially, I don't want to say carve, but be careful with the creation of the side slope so it doesn't undermine the plants. So to get that equipment down there requires, since the federal government is doing it, a temporary construction easement over the properties that aren't owned by the federal government. Now, the times that the town did this in the past, there was a memorandum of agreement that was between or among the town, the country club, and who signed that? The first selectman signed it, the country club representative signed it, and the Harbor Management Commission signed it. It was a memorandum laying out the responsibilities of everyone to move the equipment along the beach to get to the site. So the first, but the Corps of Engineers requires a formal easement, and the process for obtaining an easement is somewhat expensive and time-consuming. They have to do a survey, and then there's a formula by which they calculate the value of the easement and what the federal government would pay the property owner for the use of the easement. An alternative is for the property owner to waive that fee. Or how did we describe that? Waive the right to an appraisal and compensation. Because the way the Corps of Engineers described this, the survey costs a lot of money and takes a lot of time, and it may turn up that the compensation is a few $100s. So the town, when we talked about this with the engineering department, which has experience having to get easements on their own projects, it appears that the town will be willing to waive that assessment. And there's a form that the Corps of Engineers will provide to waive that form. But it still we need to show the area this is through Sasko Beach. And there would be a need to have not just a route from the beach, but an area designated where they could keep equipment overnight perhaps. But the other part is, now we're going to contact the Country Club of Fairfield to discuss this. But there would also be a need for a similar agreement with the Country Club of Fairfield to go across the beach to get to the site of the dredging project. So that,
and if I could just interrupt, I'm Tim Moynihan. I am the general manager at the Country Club of Fairfield, so that's why I'm here. I knew this was on the agenda.
Yeah. So that's something that we'll have to discuss with the club. And then the other part of it is, as we've discussed, the Corps asked us if we could assemble. It was interesting because you know that the history of this goes back to 1829 with the construction or the authorization for the federal government to construct the wall and the jetty, and the reports report that everything was completed by 1837. So that there are historical documents that are associated with that, the federal authorization, and then the state ceding the state's jurisdiction and property to the federal government to build the jetty. So the two things that we need to discuss with the country club are one, that the access agreement, so that the Corps can, and what we talked about with the excavator is not bringing it on a trailer with a truck, but doing what the Public Works Department did in 2014. They called it walking the excavator along the beach. In other words, they're not putting it on a trailer. They just have the excavator travel on its treads along the beach. And then there would be a need for some metal plates over by Sasco Beach to avoid sinking down into the subtidal and intertidal area. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that the DEP's application for doing this work requires an assertion of the ownership of the property being worked on. So we'll be cutting into that sand spit on the west side of the jetty. And since we're taking significant part, that's our plan, to take a significant part of that away to restore the 100-foot wide channel. So since that's above mean high water, they have to make a declaration of ownership of that sand spit. And that's why they asked us to assemble whatever historic documents we could get from the state library about the actual authorization of this back in 1829, which is, state library is very, very helpful, and the documents are quite interesting. So that apparently this real estate matter with the easement and the statement of the ownership, the way the Corps described this, Ken, I think maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong. That's the remaining significant part of this to move everything forward, because the money is available for doing this.
And the timing now is looking like if we get all of our ducks in a row, do we have a
No timing. No timing.
Well, the goal would be to next year, beginning and it's interesting that when we talked about this, they feel that they could do this work in about a week, but it only takes, years to figure out, how to do it.
A decade to figure it out.
Get the approval, yeah.
Right.
So that's where we are, and I think
Right.
the next step is to get with the country club and discuss that access easement,
Right.
which is essentially similar to what we did before with the club, with less equipment, because we wouldn't be bringing trucks.
Right.
And the front loader and moving the trucks back and forth along the beach.
Right, theoretically, it would come down Sasco Beach Road there, come along the beach and sit there for however long the dredging takes, and then when they're done, turn around and go back.
But the other part of it too is when Public Works talked about this with us, they also, the workers took their vehicles down the main club driveway from Sasco Hill Road along the paved road to get down there. So I don't know if the Corps would want to do that now. They said that they showed that originally on a drawing, that would be access for them too. So if they have any access, not with heavy equipment, but by individual vehicles, that would also require an easement, the temporary construction easement they talked about.
This work would be wintertime work along there.
Yeah.
So we're talking not a heavy golfing season.
Dredging season is what, Devin, generally?
Depends on the job.
Okay.
Typically, October 1 to late January. Is it just the shoal? Is there any dredging going on in any part of the other part of the channel?
We talked about that, and that they need different equipment to do that.
They're gonna have the current stuff, right?
Yeah, but the material in the channel outward a little bit, they tested that and they said that they can't do that. They're not going to do that with the Currituck because it's more silty material.
And we discussed it with them, a year and a half, 2 years ago, and they said that they had to do testing, and that the testing would take at least a year and slow everything down at least a year.
And also that would require a contract with an outside contractor. So they asked if we would want to do all of it at once, or they have the money to do the work with the Currituck now. So our decision was to go ahead with that, deal with the other one when we have to.
And we talked about that here.
Yeah, it seems like, judging the pace, that it's all pace.
Right.
The shoal was compelling, because you can see it.
Right.
You go by it, and wow, that's a lot of sand.
You hit the other, it's compelling.
It's the deepest part of the channel.
It is, absolutely. You're absolutely right.
That's where it's the deepest.
Deepest, at all times.
What is unknown, out at the end of the breakwater, that that red zone at the end of the breakwater is moving further and further west. And that's the one that's gonna speak up on us. because
Right.
we can't see it.
Oh, that's.
No question.
That's the next step, but
Right,
if we were to wait for that, we don't know when.
Yeah, understood.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
it's good,
yeah.
good one to make sure it's going.
And the other part of it is, and the Corps said this is considered a maintenance dredging project. So they are not going to work with us to plan a way to avoid the sand going over the jetty. So if we were to work on that, we need to work with the country clubs on a separate, or we're coordinated with this, but.
But it's gonna be 25 feet wider than it's been in anyone's recent memory anyway, so we have that reserve capacity.
Right,
So, I mean, the proper planning would be to try to do something to slow down the movement of sand over the wall.
Agreed. But if we look at expenditure of resources and time, I think we might find that the tip of the breakwater might be the next thing.
no question, no question, you're absolutely right. And they acknowledge that, they've acknowledged that in our meetings, but again, the question for us was, do you want to add another year on to at least another year? And when they say that, I'm thinking 2 years or 3 years, and, right?
The other part of that is that material would have to be disposed of in Long Island Sound.
Yeah.
So the sand that we can take with the Currituck doesn't require, approval from New York State, or we're doing that in a near shore area.
I'm curious to look at what sampling was done there, so I'd be surprised to see it being very fine grained. That would bring more fit, with a lot of the same material that's coming.
They told us that they would have to do that with different equipment, and it would have to be contracted.
Yeah,
Different time, different schedule, so.
Yeah.
totally, yeah.
They started that process though, for the rest of the channel, with the sampling they need, so we don't have to.
I don't know that they have the
No,
money.
I don't think that they.
Started
that.
And I mean, that was the other thing. The money that they have is just for this.
Did they do the full channel when they did the, Anchorage?
They did, when they did it was 2004.
Yeah.
And that was the result of the harbor management plan dealing with all these issues. And the plan was to dredge everything, including the 100-foot wide channel. If you remember, it was DEP at the time who objected to that. So they dredged the whole project at that time.
But 75 feet, yeah, that's right.
Only 75-foot width at the mouth.
Well, thanks for all the hard work you guys are doing, because it's all a coup to get any dredging done.
Yeah.
Snail's
So,
pace.
definitely appreciated.
Snail's pace.
We worked for 5 years, and the project is done in a week.
But, so, just to summarize, so I have it, it would be to meet with the country club with the intention of developing a memo of understanding and easement.
This wouldn't be a memo of understanding like it was before. It would be an actual agreement with the Corps of Engineers for a temporary construction access easement. And that there would be an agreement to, if the club agrees, to waive the right to an appraisal and compensation, which the Corps said could cost $20,000 to do the
And take another
appraisal and the
year.
survey, and then the compensation might be a few $100s. Whether they are exaggerating it.
1 week's use of a limited
Yeah,
portion of
yeah.
the property.
I mean, I think if we could sit down with the country club on shore and come up with something like in 2 hours, but that's what we would come up with is not necessarily what the Corps needs.
And we don't have the form yet. They were gonna send us the form for both the town to sign and if the club is willing for the club to sign.
Will they let us, if they send us the form, will they let us interact directly with the clubs? I'm sure we can work out faster than the government.
Oh, I don't see why we can't. I mean, I don't.
Signed, executed the same with the town, and say, here's your easement.
Yeah, that's what we're proceeding as a part of the process.
But they'll let us do that. If they get us these easements, we press them. Easements are form, gotta be form up to the computer.
But we haven't seen it yet.
I know.
We haven't seen it yet, so, we're
These all the time,
optimistic.
you know what
We're
it is.
ever optimistic on this, so.
Getting into the, maybe drifting.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
get shorter.
So Tim, do you have any questions for us?
No, just to clarify, the actual dredging would take place using mechanical equipment on land. That would then dump the sand into a barge that would take it up, so it's not being dredged from the water.
Some of it
Some of it will be.
Okay.
So the actual dredge, It's a hydraulic hopper dredge. I think it's 150 feet long and it has these suction things on the side. It works in sandy areas and sucks the sand up into the hull. And then when it's filled, it goes offshore and the hull splits and disperses the sand. But in this instance, because of the need to, I guess, be careful in how they're dealing with the side slope, some of the material will be put in, the hopper dredge won't take all the material itself. Some of it will be put in with an excavator. So it'll be a combination of the dredge itself working and the excavator putting. We have some pictures, we have some photos showing it in operation in other harbors.
I know we walked the site a couple of years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. I know we walked the site a couple of years ago, but I mean, is that part of the survey process to determine what the line of the new sand line is going to be, or I mean, how far back are we going? I know that you know, the jetty comes kind of like ties back to our wall.
Right.
So are you going all the way?
No, not all the way to
Just
the,
100 feet.
but that survey has already been done,
Okay.
the plan. The survey we're talking about is the area that would be, if it was needed to be done, is the area. The construction access easement is what the survey we were talking about today.
Got it.
Do you,
So would you need a survey to do that, or could you just do a simple exhibit of where it's intended to be if the parties agree to it?
If the parties agree to it, we don't need the survey. That's why we're asking.
we don't want the survey.
Waive the right of the appraisal and the compensation.
We don't want the
And
survey.
we just show it
because
on a drawing.
That's January 2025, if we're lucky. I was gonna say
Does
something.
that answer your questions?
Yes.
And we have pictures of that 2004, after Hurricane Sandy, of the excavator coming in. Have you seen those? We can send, we'll send those pictures to you.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly imagine what that looks like. I guess the one thing that I would like to see, you know, if there's a drawing as to what the targeted new sand line would be, I'd be curious to see. I don't think I've seen that.
Yep.
Okay. Any questions for Jeff? From anybody? Any more questions? Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mooring Committee, Mr. Warren, it did not meet this last month, so there's nothing for him to report. New business development at 2190 Post Road, formerly the Exide property. We have not heard from the developer, but Jeff has chatted briefly with Deep about the bulkhead that is right there up against the bank of the river on what will be, or what is conceptually planned to be, the public access area. And do you want to just tell us briefly what you've discovered?
Well, this is another very interesting project. And I talked with a member of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission today. So all they've received so far is a concept plan for the redevelopment of the property.
Right.
With a statement that there will be a public access area, but without any details for that. And then there's been a discussion about the bulkhead that exists there now. Now apparently that bulkhead was authorized by the Inland Wetlands Commission some years ago, when there were inland wetlands that were found on that site. And the condition of the permit was that it would be removed when the remediation was complete, and the shoreline would be restored to its natural condition. And apparently a bond was posted for covering that. But then in 2018, at a meeting of the Inland Wetlands Agency, the bond was released. And can't find any discussion as to why it was released, but there doesn't seem to be any interest now by the Inland Wetlands Agency of removing that bulkhead. However, it doesn't have a permit from DEEP, and how that happened is unknown. So DEEP has contacted, the regulatory part of DEEP has contacted the owner or representative of the owner to mention it has no permit, and in other words, it's a violation. And the owner indicated to DEEP that they have no intention of removing it. It's not their problem, or not their responsibility. So there's unknowns about that. But when I talked with the person from Town Plan and Zoning, I also mentioned that this redevelopment plan, when it's actually an actual plan, should be referred to the Harbor Management Commission formally by the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, since the work there, even though it's not in the harbor, it could affect the harbor. And that was the premise of us reviewing the remediation project in the first place. Now, the TP&Z member was not aware of this requirement for referral. So I don't know if this commission would want to provide a letter to TP&Z pointing out the requirement for the referral of the development redevelopment plan. But right now we don't have a proposal for public access on this property. The only statement we read, in the conceptual plan was that the public access provided will be great, in the words of the developer. So we don't have a plan. So I don't know how really to proceed, except to continue to talk with DEEP about what they learn about the bulkhead and whether DEEP will require. If it's not permitted, DEEP is going to require an after-the-fact permit for it.
To leave it there.
To leave it there.
And then there's a question that we talked about in our last meeting, which is how do you access this for public use?
Well, you'd have to access it from the property. You couldn't access it from the river.
Yeah, I have a comment and a question, if I may.
Yep, Don?
This is Don.
Yep.
I attended the planning and zoning hearing where the concept plan for this property was presented. That's been discussed. And indeed, one of the commissioners of the TPZ, Alexis Harrison, raised the point about the bulkhead at that time. And she also said, and others were nodding, that this matter needs to come to our commission, the Harbor Management Commission. And so I would say there was verbal discussion about it, but I think it would be a good idea to underscore that and send, if the commission is so inclined, send a letter telling them that is our expectation and the legal requirement, if that's indeed the case. So that's one observation. Two, I don't have personally a clear view on the advantages or disadvantages of taking down the bulkhead. I see the bulkhead. I know where it is. I know why it was put up. I know it doesn't have a technical permit. I know the owner doesn't want to move it. I don't know myself why anyone should or shouldn't remove that bulkhead.
That's a good question.
And I don't think we do.
I don't think we do either.
And I think it depends on what the public access provisions might be. And I don't believe the Inland Wetlands Agency and the Mr. Bishop, the conservation director, believe that it's necessary to remove the bulkhead either.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that it might not be a good thing to do, depending on what we envision for the shoreline there.
Yeah, the plan, the concept plan calls for kind of a walking area, small walking area, along the Mill River there. I can tell you that there are people on the commission that would like to see that walking area bigger. They would like to see open space bigger than is in the concept plan. But again, a concept plan is a concept plan. It's nothing firm.
Well, if I could just chime in here, Don, as you recall, we wrote a letter to TP&Z that was presented at that meeting, reminding them that the Harbor Commission needs to be be notified before any action is taken on property that impacts the river. And so as you recall, it was not a well-received letter, but we did put it out there. I would suggest that we wait until we have a real plan. We just have a concept plan at this point. And we don't know what actually the developer is planning, is going to take from that meeting and incorporate, or how, if at all, he will change the plans that he submitted for that meeting. So I think we have time, but I agree we should, at some point in the process, when it gets closer to the time when they're really considering what's going to go up and what it would look like, that yes, we need to remind them that the commission needs to have notice and the opportunity to comment on their proposed plan.
Yeah, the letter, as I recall, was in connection with the Perry Mill Green work.
Correct.
And they saw, they weren't, they felt like their wrists were being slapped, and I guess they were.
Right. Who them?
I don't know that they would necessarily connect the bulkhead issue at whatever that issue is. I still don't know, how I feel about it, one way or the other.
Well, I think we also in that letter, in fact, I know in that letter we also requested that those commissions and town bodies that were so heavily involved in the remediation of the Exide property have an opportunity to comment on the public open space. As I recall, there were a couple of commissioners who thought that was appropriate. So I think we have time. I'm not suggesting we don't do it. I just think we should wait until we have something more concrete to comment on. But I take other opinions, for sure.
No, I take your point, Kim. I think you're correct.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll see if I can get more information on the bulkhead and what DEEP intends to do with it, and think about what an appropriate public access amenities.
I'm hearing the wetlands folks appear not to have a concern about the bulkhead today.
Yes, that's my understanding.
The DEEP has a concern that it's not permitted, and the person representing the ownership of the property is suggesting that they have no interest in removing the bulkhead themselves.
And that's what I learned from DEEP, who contacted me.
Reported by DEEP. Okay, so
and our own commission
we're not likely to see a proposal from the developer that's going to show us a removal of the bulkhead. It's going to be something with a bulkhead.
Don?
And it would seem, based on what I'm hearing, that our own commission has no strong feeling about the wisdom of a bulkhead or removing a bulkhead either.
Well, I think we don't know.
At this time.
Yeah, we don't know what it does, what it was put there for, what the impact of removing it would be or keeping it would be. So, I think we need to investigate, and if Jeff will do that, I think that would be very helpful.
Jeff, there would have been a significant staff recommendation that the department had given to the Inland Wetlands Agency when it reviewed the proposal, and that would very likely have a lot of information. And then you would go to the minutes when the commission, the Inland Wetlands Agency, actually voted to approve it, and it would be detailed there.
Did somebody?
We got the minutes when the bond was released, and there was no discussion. It was just a motion to release the bond. And I talked to one of the commission members who was there at the time, who didn't remember any discussion at the time. It was Mr. Bull. But I haven't gone back to find the minutes when they authorized the bulkhead and what the conditions were. So I'll do that.
Okay, that would be,
in the staff rec.
In the staff recommendation.
There's a staff recommendation. How does where do those go?
They're in the file.
In the file?
In the conservation part.
Okay, great. Yeah. Betty, thank you. Anything else about the Exide formerly the Exide property? Okay, the POCD, the massive document that the town folks have put together, very impressive, does not mention the harbor management plan, says very little about dredging in Southport and very little about the Mill River itself.
So apparently that we have some time, that they've delayed the action on adopting this. So one thought, and again, talking about this with several members of the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, that we could prepare, not a long section, but just a description of Southport Harbor and the Harbor Management Plan that we would ask to be included in the POCD with a statement of support for the Harbor Management Plan. Because the two plans, as described in the Harbor Management Plan, are meant to be complementary. One focuses on the land use and the other on harbor use and conservation, and they interact. So I think that relationship should be mentioned in my opinion, in the POCD, which should express support for implementation of the Harbor Management Plan. The POCD doesn't include much description. Well, there has been a number of comments about the POCD and what it includes and what it doesn't include. But the Commission's responsibility is Southport Harbor. So I think we could prepare, over the next month and take a look at it next month, a statement concerning the harbor and the Harbor Management Plan, and we'd ask that be included in the POCD. I know the Forestry Committee is doing the same thing with respect to with the town's forest management plan, and they have a 2 or 3 page statement with the basic goals of so we could work on that between now and the next month, if that is what you would like to do.
I think it's a good idea.
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a good idea too, yeah.
Not too far.
No, because it just references the Harbor Management Plan.
Right. And this is to guide decisions going into the future. I think it would be short-sighted.
And we can also mention the process of the role of the Harbor Management Commission in reviewing getting into this statute that we were just talking about, reviewing applications, land use applications that affect the harbor.
Affects the harbor, yeah.
Yeah, great idea.
I would add to that. I think initially, when the consultant that developed that plan put it together, there was a great deal of pushing to get it approved quickly by the TPZ, and that resulted in some significant questioning by some of the TPZ members. Why do we need to rush this through? It's not due for another 3 years. And so our concerns about the harbor, other concerns about density along the post road and the implications of that, all of those issues and more I think are going to be discussed at TPZ, and the document will change.
Well, it's a massive document, a very impressive effort. I can't imagine that you wouldn't want a lot of comment, because how could you possibly think of everything? I mean, just a massive, massive undertaking. But Jeff, that would be great if you could prepare something, and we can take a look at that at our next meeting.
You should point out their mistakes that need to be corrected, like Southport Harbor is not just a private dock and anchorage.
Right.
And they're forgetting to dredge it. They say just dredge town marine, and that's not
right.
If we're going looking for projects in the future, the POC.
And I circulated, or Betty embedded in the agenda, some photos that Jeff put together, compiled of the various waterfront areas. And so you can see that Fairfield has a lot of waterfront area that attention needs to be paid to that in terms of development and going forward. Any questions about, or other comments about POCD? Any new business? Jeff?
We were talking about the coastal site plan reviews and the need to refer those to the Harbor Management Commission, and the Perry Green work that was subject to a coastal site plan review. Do we need that, Devin, for the repairs at the lower wharf? I would imagine that we do, don't we?
Coastal site plan?
Yeah, if we're going to work on the wall and the structures, so we'll need to get TP&Z approval for that. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that would be typical.
Not yet.
Well,
I idea what we're doing.
Our scope was state federal permits, so you wouldn't get them now, and I don't think you'd get them until you had a project.
Right.
They expire They're not 5-year permits.
Yeah.
They're about 1 year.
But looking ahead, we'll need that as well.
Correct.
And then also talking with engineering before the meeting, they anticipate for the Perry Green project that the work will go out to bid in mid-October, and that they would start sometime in mid to late November to redo the Perry Green bulkhead. So they asked if I could report on that today. I don't know what coordination that may require with the yacht club, since the bulkhead attaches to the yacht club's
Well, we've got to
property.
make sure the boats are not there because
Right, it's
the moorings are still in place.
in October,
Their
yeah.
season's not over yet, so if they're gonna start in November, I need to know when, because I might have to relocate boats.
Yeah,
And
that's,
get the moorings pulled before they.
boats that are there, and they do the frostbiting in the winter in the
Correct.
harbor too.
so they said that there will be a pre-construction, once they select the contractor.
Should you make sure they include me in that?
Yeah,
So I can-
that's what they said.
Good.
They're just putting it, that seems very tight, doesn't it? The time between the putting it out
Good
to
for
bid.
them.
Yeah,
Good
They
for
said they-
them.
They had to have it out for 4 weeks, I think, for the notice.
okay.
Wow, that's great.
So yes, in the pre-construction discussions would would include the harbor master, someone from the Pequot Yacht Club,
Sure.
and the Harbor Management Commission.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, for bringing those up. Anything else? Any public comment?
Get well soon, Doug, or Don.
Thank you very much.
Yes, get well soon. Sorry to hear that you were,
Yeah. It's no mystery here, this is prostate surgery, but painful, but
Been there,
not
done
on
that.
yeah,
Well, you're on the mend, and that's the
Yeah.
good news. Look forward to seeing you in October.
Thank
Can
you.
I have, if there's nothing else we need to discuss, can I have a motion to adjourn? Jack moves,
Second.
Doug seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, we're done. See everybody in October.
Good on you.